Missing 411 Podcast. Welcome back to the Missing 411 Podcast. I'm your host, and tonight, we delve deep into the unforgiving wilderness and the inexplicable circumstances that leave us with more questions than answers. We aren't talking about simple accidents here. We're discussing cases that defy logic, that share chilling, almost pattern-like traits, and that suggest something else is out there. We have a long night ahead of us, covering multiple cases that all share those classic 411 markers. The sudden disappearance, the strange behavior before vanishing, the abandoned items, and the proximity to rugged wilderness and, often, bodies of water. Our first story takes us to a remote river bank, where the details are so bizarre and contradictory that they immediately raise the red flags we look for. This is the case of Jessica, and the only other person there was a man named Jerry. The official story, at least the one initially given to the authorities, was that the two of them, Jessica and Jerry, were out on the river. Now, the river was swollen, running fast. And here is where our first 411 characteristic kicks in: strange preparation for a dangerous activity. They didn't have paddles. Instead, they had only shovels to navigate the swollen currents. Jerry claims they both struggled with addiction, perhaps explaining this terrible decision, but Jessica's mother firmly believes her daughter would never have risked it. The boat somehow made it to a sandbank, and Jerry claims Jessica was stranded. But here is the major deviation from reality. Jerry says Jessica showed no interest in getting back in the boat. Instead, she just started walking. She began walking toward Highway 30, a strange, almost trance-like movement, until she walked right out of view. What force compelled her to abandon the safety of the boat for an empty highway? Jerry then claims he returned to the sandbank, and Jessica was nowhere to be found. But his next actions are deeply suspicious, a clear indicator of obfuscation or panic. Instead of calling for help, he simply left the boat abandoned right where it was, and then called a friend to come pick him up. He never reported her missing. It wasn't until 10:15 that night that authorities were finally informed she hadn't come home. This delay is inexcusable and casts a long, dark shadow over Jerry's entire account of events. When the sandbank was finally searched, investigators found the chilling hallmarks of the strange and unexplained. They discovered Jessica's coat, a glove, a shovel with a broken handle, and perhaps the strangest item, a single boot with the top cut clean off. This detail is deeply unsettling. Was it a hurried attempt to escape, or something else entirely? They found a set of footprints leading only about 100 yards toward the highway before disappearing into a flooded field where the trail went cold. The trail vanished into water, as if Jessica had simply evaporated. Jessica's mother, a vital source in this case, stresses that her daughter would never have left her phone with a friend and found the detail of Jessica's purse being found in the abandoned boat highly suspicious. These facts defy the common sense of an adult trying to get home. Then, the whole case shattered again. Jerry gave a media interview and completely reversed his story, denying he was at the river, denying he borrowed a boat, and claiming he hadn't seen Jessica that day. The evidence suggests a terrifying confrontation or, perhaps, a bizarre non-human intervention that caused this frantic, contradictory response from the witness. Jessica's case remains cold. Let's transition now from the muddy riverbanks to the rugged, vertical peaks of Alaska for the perplexing disappearance of Brad Brose in August 2016. Brad was a 46-year-old father, enjoying a solo hiking trip after his daughter flew home. This is a common element we see. The experienced hiker staying alone, often near a transition point. Brad was last confirmed seen at 9:45 p.m. near the Alyeska Resort Hotel. Remember the time. In late August this far north, there was still plenty of daylight. At 9:45 p.m., Brad signed the trail log at the Winter Creek trailhead and talked briefly to other hikers. The area is a classic 411 location due to two extreme routes: the dangerous Upper Winter Creek Trail leading into alpine country, and the infamous hand tram, suspended 100 feet over rushing water. The hand tram, which tragically had claimed a life in the past, was an anomaly. Brad never mentioned where he intended to go. Was he drawn to the perilous crossing of the tram, or did he take the difficult alpine route? The search was hindered by low wind, making it nearly impossible for the dog teams to find a scent. But here's the crucial technological data point. For about an hour after Brad was last seen, his phone was still giving a strong, clear signal. That signal then stopped sometime after 10:32 p.m. It didn't fade. It cut out. The official theory is a dead battery or water damage, but search teams scoured the winter and glacier creeks and found absolutely nothing. This is a classic 411 pattern. The experienced person vanishes near a geographic anomaly, a canyon, a hand tram, or rushing water, and all trace is gone, despite a strong, recent phone signal. The sudden, absolute silence of that phone at 10:32 p.m. suggests a massive, sudden force. Did something at the hand tram, something silent and capable of operating in the Alaskan mountains, cause an instant shorting, a complete severing of contact? Brad was last seen carrying a laptop bag, another non-essential item for a quick hike. Was this bag what drew him to a dangerous crossing, or was it used as bait by an unknown predator? Let's talk about the tragic disappearance of John Donovan in May 2005 on Mount San Jacinto, while attempting the Pacific Crest Trail. John, a retired social worker, ignored all good advice. A friend was delayed by a storm, and other hikers warned John to wait or take an ice axe. He refused, determined to start his journey alone, a powerful indicator of psychological fixation or drive. Other hikers saw him struggling, slipping and falling a lot, but he seemed compelled to keep going, almost as if he was being pushed by an unseen force. John was last seen alone at 8,080 feet, just before the whiteout conditions hit. The trail vanished, and he kept a makeshift diary, writing on his maps. He described losing the path and heading toward the lights of Palm Springs. His final entry is a haunting message that confirms his isolated final moments. Going down to the creek for water. Goodbye and love you all. This note ends the communication. He died alone, in the cold, after ignoring every warning. The discovery of John's fate is almost as strange as his disappearance. Exactly a year later, in May 2006, two lost hikers, Brandon Day and Gina Allen, stumbled across John's camp and his diary. The diary and the matches he left behind allowed them to signal rescuers, saving their lives. This is an astonishing coincidence that defies probability. Recovery teams then found John's body only about 50 yards from his camp, in a pool near a waterfall, an area that should have been searched extensively. 50 yards. This is a classic 411 proximity pattern. The remains are found frustratingly close to a structure or the last known location, in an area previously searched, often near water. Why did he fall into that pool only 50 yards from the camp that was intact enough to save two other people a year later? The way his preserved diary was used to save others makes you wonder if John's final actions were unknowingly guided by a ghostly, predictive intelligence in the mountain, a desperate final offering to the unfortunate souls who would follow. Now we cover the case of Eloise Lindsay, who went missing in the South Carolina wilderness in November 1989. Eloise, a well-trained hiker, signed the logbook as Eloise and George Lindsay to conceal that she was alone, another misdirection often seen in these cases. She was later seen on Sassafras Mountain, and then she vanished, only to emerge 2 weeks later from the wilderness. Eloise's story is where the true strangeness lies. She claimed she had been running for 2 weeks to escape men who were chasing her. She said she overheard two hunters on walkie-talkies talking about her and, believing they had bad intentions, she immediately dropped her pack and ran. Her fear, she says, is what made her abandon her training. Not starting a fire, not signaling, running blindly. Authorities found no evidence of a chase. Authorities treated it as a case of a mental or fear-induced flight, dismissing the chase. But this is a key thread in 411 research. The feeling of being watched, the sudden, inexplicable urge to flee, followed by a burst of superhuman endurance or travel, often leading to a disoriented return. What if the voices weren't human? What if she encountered the silent, massive presence of a Sasquatch or some ancient, territorial entity that uses psychological coercion to scare humans out of its domain? The creature may not have wanted to attack, but simply herded her out of the mountains, leaving her broken and paranoid. We move now to the Three Sisters Wilderness in Oregon for the case of the Corwin Osborne in June 2002. Corwin was an overly experienced climber, capable of hiking 40 miles a day, who set out to climb all 3 mountains in one day. This overconfidence in skills is a classic 411 precursor. He left with enough food and water for the day, and a space blanket, but seemingly little else for an emergency. He never arrived at the meeting point. Days later, a skier came forward, saying he'd seen a solo hiker on a saddle north of Middle Sister. The hiker, presumably Corwin, didn't speak, didn't acknowledge the skier, and just continued on his journey, silent and fast. The search shifted north, but no trace was ever found. Was Corwin moving so fast because he was in a trance-like state? Let's pivot to the bizarre Oregon case of Glenda Sushopa in November 2005. Glenda, 62, with a history of mental illness, went missing from her home. 5 days later, her 1985 Subaru station wagon was located in Mount Hood National Forest. The strange detail that defies all logic is this. The car was found covered in a thick layer of black mold. How does a car get covered in mold in only 5 days? This suggests an accelerated decay or an unexplained environmental anomaly. The police speculated the car was placed there after the fact. But let's consider the 411 lens. Was this location, this specific forest road, one of those geographic hotspots where the natural rules of time and decomposition are severely warped? Perhaps a low-frequency energy field, associated with high granite concentrations or even a hidden underground facility, caused the fungus to bloom at an impossible speed. Our next case takes us to the vast Navajo Reservation wilderness in Arizona, the disappearance of German national Rainer Kirchner in March 2007. Rainer was an experienced hiker exploring the Little Colorado River Gorge. He checked in with his girlfriend on March 20th and then, absolute silence. His rental camper was found near the rim of the gorge, about 2 miles from an area known ominously as Hellhole Bed. This area is notorious for its dangerous sinkholes, natural portals into the earth, that connect to an underground water system. The search began 22 devastating days later, and of course no trace was found. The sinkholes are the logical culprits, but we must also consider the persistent local rumors. It was mentioned that there were rumors of strange lights in the sky on the day that he was last seen. This introduces the possibility of a brief, terrifying encounter with an aerial phenomenon, a UFO that descended near Hellhole Bed, emitting a field of disorientation or panic, causing Rainer to stumble into one of the vertical portals. The desert swallowed him whole. Let's return to the San Jacinto Mountains for Randy Charles Spring in 1988. Randy, a military veteran and volunteer firefighter, told his mother he was going hiking for a few days and would hitchhike home. He vanished, and not a single piece of his gear was ever found. His mother later expressed doubt that he ever went hiking, suggesting he may have simply started a new life. But why use the wilderness as the cover story? The official explanation is a bad hitchhiking encounter. Yet, the question lingers. If he wanted to disappear, did he knowingly choose a location famous for swallowing people? Or did some powerful, ancient energy on that mountain, the same force that claimed John Donovan, offer Randy a compulsion to flee, using its own mysterious nature as the perfect, untraceable escape mechanism? The truth remains shrouded in the desert wind. Our final case involves a young man under immense academic pressure, who went missing in Mount Hood National Forest. This is the case of Stephen Reed in June 1999. Stephen, a 24-year-old medical student, was under severe stress. He collected 2 trail guides and walked into the Salmon Huckleberry Wilderness. His car was found at the trailhead, and his disappearance was noted a week later. The search was massive, covering thousands of man-hours in a steep, wet area. Yet here is the terrifying bottom line. Not a single piece of evidence was ever found. No pack, no trace of a fire, no clothing, no sign of a fall. Stephen Reed achieved a zero-trace disappearance in a known cluster location. In cases like Stephen's, where the individual may be in a psychologically vulnerable state, the landscape itself seems to consume them whole. It's as if the pressure, the anxiety, the desperate desire to escape, created a momentary tear in the fabric of reality that the wilderness willingly facilitated. Was Stephen's wish to get away so powerful that it was granted by an ancient, territorial entity that simply plucked him from our dimension, leaving behind a total, unsettling vacuum? The wilderness, after all, is the oldest mystery. What unites these 11 disparate cases, spanning decades and thousands of miles? It's the pattern. The abandonment of possessions, the proximity to water or a geographic anomaly, the strange behavioral changes, the dismissal of warnings, and the total lack of evidence. Something is happening in these remote locations. Something is plucking people from the fringes of our world, leaving behind only contradictions and the nagging sense that the wild has a mechanism for vanishing people that we simply refuse to accept. We must continue to ask the questions, because until we do, the pattern will continue, and the true meaning of the 411 cases will remain a terrifying secret held by the dark places of our continent. Missing 411 Podcast. Thank you for joining us tonight on the Missing 411 Podcast. We'll be back next week with more unsettling cases from the dark edges of the map. Until then, stay vigilant and watch your six.